You referred to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited in terms of the economy, our foreign policy, and domestic division. And I think, I won't put words in anybody's mouth, most presidential historians give me credit for having accomplished more than most any president since Johnson and maybe before that to get major pieces of legislation passed. And what I realized was my long time in the Senate had equipped me to have the wisdom to know how to deal with the Congress, to get things done. We got more major legislation passed that no one thought would happen. And I want to finish it, to get that finished. If tomorrow, if we had a circumstance where there was a lineup and I hadn't inherited what I did and we just moved things along, anyway, it's going to change.
It's been said that history is far too important to be left up to historians. And if what Biden just said there is correct about how many presidential historians assessed his presidency as an absolute success, truer words were never spoken. And even Democrats are now admitting it. Wait until you see how Biden's own party is now assessing his presidency. Let's just put it this way. Jimmy Carter, to the extent that he's even conscious, could not possibly be more thankful for a Biden presidency. Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, coming to you from beautiful, lovely Maine. I'm on vacation with my family, but I just had to comment on this crazy article that just came out from Newsweek magazine. This is going to absolutely blow you away. Gang, first, I do want to give a quick shout out to my good friend and sponsor, Ross Gibbons. Make sure you click on that link below and sign up for an insider trading free webinar that Ross is giving that'll show you how you can access the same kind of insider trading information that Nancy Pelosi has, but you're going to do it legally and ethically. It's this Thursday, July 25th, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up for it just by clicking on the link below. Ross is an insider trading expert whose recommendations have led to investment returns of, get this, over 200%. Some have hit as high as nearly 1,500%. It could be an absolutely amazing free training where you can learn how to trade with the exact same insider knowledge as these politicians have, but legally and ethically. The one thing is you can't wait. Seating registration is limited, so click on that link below right now. One of the recurring themes that we heard over and over again coming from the oatmeal-crusted lips of Joe Biden is that presidential historians all agreed that his presidency was one of the most epic we've ever seen in the history of our nation. He got more legislation done than any other previous president since Lyndon Johnson, blah, 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 blah. The problem for Biden, what he had never admitted to, was that the legislation that he passed was deeply, and I mean deeply, unpopular with the American people. I mean, voters overwhelmingly rejected Bidenomics. They rejected his approach to the economy, the inflation surging policies he implemented. They overwhelmingly rejected the chaos that he deliberately inflicted on our southern border. They overwhelmingly rejected his support of extreme trans issues. They overwhelmingly rejected his soft on crime approach, his initiatives to send literally hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. When all is said and done, Biden's governance, his administration's policies were some of the single most unpopular policies ever inflicted upon the nation by a sitting president. And now, as we're seeing his presidency implode in real time, we're now getting polls that show that a significant number of Democrats feel that exact same way. Take a look at this from Newsweek. Joe Biden is one of the worst presidents in history, 1 in 5 Democrats says. It's a July poll from Rasmussen. It found that 22% of Democrats agreed that Biden was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. And if you were wondering, the survey was taken about 2 weeks or so before Biden dropped out of the race. And the fact that no matter how much he and the legacy media pundits push this absurd narrative, that presidential historians all agree that Biden's the single most successful president in our lifetimes. The very fact that Biden ended up dropping out is proof that all of that was pure BS. The divide between how the American people, including 20% of Democrats, assessed his presidency versus how these liberal historians were assessing his presidency simply could not be wider or more stark. In fact, it was widely recognized that Biden, when all was said and done, Biden was really the single most unpopular president in the last 7 decades. His approval rating was consistently in the mid to low 30s, rivaled only by his vice president, Kamala Harris, whose disapproval has been one of the stains of her own vice presidency, being the most unpopular vice president in modern polling history. And this, to me, is what's so utterly fascinating by the time we're living in right now. We often talk about how our politics is dramatically changing away from a horizontal divide, a divide between the left versus the right, or Democrats versus Republicans, conservatives versus liberals. We're moving away from this traditional horizontal divide, and we're reconfiguring more around a vertical divide, a divide between the people versus a permanent political class that is increasingly aloof and culturally distant from the vast majority of the country. When all's said and done, Biden's policies simply didn't hurt the gentrified liberal demographic of our nation, and the very demographic that these so-called presidential historians and university professors and legacy media commentators all belong to. For them, Biden's presidency was great. It represented nothing less than an existential equilibrium, rescuing our nation from the tumultuous years of the nationalist populist threat of the Trump administration. But as all the polls show, the vast majority of the country actually believes that those Trump years were by far superior to Biden's tenure. Whenever you look at the polls that match Biden and Trump up together post-2020, they all find that voters supported Trump's economy, his tax policies, his border policies, his energy policies, and his foreign policy by double digits over Biden. Again, what's so key here is that it appears more and more that Biden was forced out not so much because of his age and his senility, which I've always argued is, yes, it is his Achilles heel. It was the pretext for why so many of his policies were so utterly and objectively disastrous. But when all is said and done, it was actually those policies that ultimately forced him out. In other words, the fact that Biden was the single most unpopular president in 7 decades can't just be explained away as the consequence of his appearing mentally frail and physically feeble. That fragility and that frailty were embodied by his disastrous policies that voters were more than ready to rectify in November by turning back to Trump, as they still are. So if that's the case, how will Biden ultimately be remembered? Where does he rank, as it were, among the nation's worst presidents? Well, again, it's hard to find a single policy that he actually got right, from the economy to the COVID mandates, from green environment initiatives to high interest rates and skyrocketing mortgages, from the Afghanistan disaster to the Ukraine disaster. The Biden administration is going to have to go down in history as perhaps the single worst president ever in terms of pure incompetence. There may have been worse presidents in terms of the ongoing and lasting deleterious effects of their disastrous presidencies. Woodrow Wilson, for example, comes to mind. But when it comes to just pure incompetence and absurdly ridiculous ineptitude, Biden, in my view, is in a class all by himself.